Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so enjoying this beautiful day because we're having a little bit of rain here and the birds are just flying around in the rain and it's rather charming to watch. But before I get started with this wonderful story tonight, don't forget to go and get yourself something lovely to drink, and if it's something unusual, let me know about it. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I stared appreciatively out of the large, extensive glass windows of the beautiful home I had designed fastidiously and built for me and my wife Frida for our retirement years. I pinched myself, for I perfectly understood how lucky we were to be finally living out our dream. I sighed with an inward sense of glowing satisfaction. This was a brand new beginning for the both of us, and I couldn't wait for us to enjoy our retirement years together in such a magical, prepossessing place such as this, where you woke up in the morning to be greeted by the idyllic views of the Alberta countryside. I had no way of knowing, of course, that 2 years after we settled into our new home, the dream I'd envisaged for the both of us would begin to grow pear-shaped and come crashing down like a huge tsunami wave, causing chaos in its wake, until something quite extraordinary happened that made me become a believer in miracles, if that was at all possible. I had been involved in building construction all my life. I was a skilled carpenter. Even when I was a boy, from an early age, I would carve boats and model cars out of wood, just for the fun of it. I also malleably bent wire into all kinds of interesting shapes to make dinosaurs, whales, dogs and cats, which people would buy from me to hang on their walls. I would fix anything that broke in our household, which my mother was very appreciative of, while my father would sometimes scratch his head in bewilderment, looking distinctly nonplussed. He would say, "How did you know how to do that, son? I can't understand. I didn't teach you any of this." Sometimes my father would say that he believed if I'd lived before in a previous incarnation, then I must have been a master builder who had not forgotten all his skills and had carried them forward into the next life, as everything for me seemed instinctive. I guess my parents perceived that when I grew up, I would definitely be involved in building in some way, as it was as natural for me to create things with my hands as brushing my teeth every morning and evening. I had decided that going to university and getting a degree would be a complete waste of time for me, for I'd always been the kind of person that finds hours of laborious study tediously boring and very drudgerous. So when I finished school, I enthusiastically embarked on a building career, without any regrets or even a moment of wavering doubt. I knew what I was doing felt intrinsically right for me. Sometimes you really need to listen to that inner voice that knows you better than you know yourself, and it's your very best guide as far as I'm concerned. For me personally, not going to university was the wisest decision I ever made in my young life. For the invaluable lessons I learnt on a building site weren't something you could replicate in a university lecture hall. I was fortunate to become an apprentice to a skilled builder called Mr. Julian Boxwell, who very generously took me under his wing and taught me everything I needed to know, from plumbing, electricity, carpentry to bricklaying, as the man was accomplished in everything he did. It was under his expert guidance I picked up all aspects of the building trade extremely fast. Mr. Boxwell had 3 daughters, and so I guess he viewed me as the son he never had. So I learnt so much for him during the course of my apprenticeship with him, although believe me, you never stop learning on the job, which is why I always found building so stimulating and rewarding. Every time a building project was completed on my watch, I felt rather like an artist that had finished creating a masterpiece and was standing back to thoroughly enjoy the finished product, which was incredibly satisfying. In truth, there is no feeling in the world quite like it. Don't get me wrong, it hasn't always been plain sailing for me. There have been obstacles I've had to overcome over the years, as is the case in everybody else's lives, I'm sure. I guess it's a hallmark of just being human, as not every path always runs smooth, and part of life's victories is managing to meet your challenges head on and to overcome them. Over the years, I've been in charge of many exciting construction projects and worked with inspirational, highly talented architects and engineers, but no project had been more important to me than designing and building my own personal home for me and my wife Frida's retirement years. It would be the time in our lives we finally left our suburban lives behind in Toronto and embarked on a whole new adventure for ourselves. My wife had insisted that wherever we lived in the future, when we retired, we needed to live in a place with spectacular mountain views. As a consequence, we came to the joint conclusion that we would very much like to build our dream home in Alberta. To my delight, an 18-acre plot of land came up for sale in the Alberta countryside, not far from the charming town of Jasper. And what in the world could be better than that, I ask you? I was entering my late 60s at this point, and our 2 daughters were now in their 30s, so we also had grandchildren, and were ready to embark on our retirement and build that quintessential dream home we'd longed for. I snapped up the land at the first opportunity I could. You don't sit on your laurels or bite your fingernails nervously, with a hesitant uncertainty when something comes on the market that ticks all the boxes for you, as God forbid someone else will snatch that sandwich of opportunity out of your hands so fast, like a seagull on the beach. By then it will be far too late for you to do anything to reverse the damage. As you can imagine, I was not going to look a gift horse in the mouth when opportunity came knocking at my door, so to speak. I had notified the estate agents months in advance to let me know if a suitable plot of land at an agreeable price range became available that could potentially be of interest to me. I specified it needed to be a property in Alberta, near a beautiful small town, on a sizable piece of land, with a prepossessing lake, exquisite views, and a generous-sized wood grove, where me and my wife could happily build our retirement home, which one day we would leave to our 2 daughters in our will, who hopefully might use our home as a holiday retreat at the very least. I vividly recall the day I got the much-awaited call from the estate agent. The estate agent that called me was a woman called Sophie Donahue, whom I'd never had dealings with before, and she called me completely out of the blue. I certainly wasn't expecting her phone call. At the time, I hadn't heard from the estate agents for many months, so I was beginning to think that they had probably long since forgotten about me. I was considering recontacting them again to remind them that I was still on the hunt for a sizable piece of land in Alberta, and to keep me in mind when something agreeable came onto the market. I remember being caught off guard when a voice on my cell phone that I didn't recognize, that sounded professionally assertive, got my undivided attention. "Is this Mr. Kurt Farnborough?" I immediately suspected that I was going to be listening to someone trying to sell me life insurance or something equally as dreary, so my curt response was somewhat abrupt. "Yes, this is Kurt Farnborough speaking. How may I help you?" The woman chuckled at the other end of the phone and said somewhat coquettishly, "Mr. Farnborough, it's more a question of how I can help you, actually. I think I may have something you might want," she said almost teasingly. "You'll be pleased to know that 18 acres of fine land has come on the market that I think may very possibly be of great interest to you. The property is substantial in size, you'll be glad to know. It has a glorious lake, stunning views, and a fabulous wood grove. There's a small cabin overlooking the lake where you could build your dream home. The best news, Mr. Farnborough, is that the place I rather suspect is in your price range. And better still, it's not far from the gorgeous town of Jasper. So you're looking at a jewel in the crown here. I assure you, if you don't act quickly, it'll be snapped up from under your nose. As I'm sure you're well aware, property in this prepossessing part of the world is in high demand, especially by property developers wanting to make big bucks out of the tourism industry. I've been to see the property myself, Mr. Farnborough, if you can call it that, because the property in question is a very insignificant little cabin. But that is not what you'd be interested in the first place. It's the land that would grab your attention. It's perfect for you, Mr. Farnborough, to build your dream home for your retirement years. Let's just say the land took my breath away quite literally, with its sparkling views over the mountains that are nothing short of sensational. I don't think you'll be remotely disappointed in what you will see. If I had that kind of money that they're asking for this property, I'd buy it myself in a heartbeat, as it's only going to appreciate in value. Places with views like this are always in high demand. So beyond anything else, this place is a piece of heaven, let me tell you, that no one in their right mind would easily overlook. I remember my heart began to flutter in my chest rather wildly, and sweat broke out on my brow, as I felt as if I was in a dream that I'd been nesting on like a female hen for so many years, and now this dream might finally be able to hatch out into my reality. I did, however, proceed with a sense of due caution during our conversation, and did my level best to keep my burgeoning enthusiasm in check, as if I didn't do so, and I prematurely got excited about something I hadn't seen, then I might end up regretting it. I knew it wouldn't be wise to get my hopes up, for in the past I'd been through many grievous disappointments that had left behind a few indelible scars, you could say. Yet it was on this unlikely phone call from Sophie Donahue, that I had not expected to receive, that I was suddenly overcome with a profound sense of prognostication, as if deep down in my gut I knew the hands of fate were auspiciously turning in my direction for a change. Could I dare to hope that this might be the perfect place where me and my wife, we could happily lay down our retirement roots and consequently build our dream home? So let me get this right, Mrs. Donahue. You're contacting me because a plot of 18 acres near Jasper has come up for sale that ticks all my boxes that I have requested. Is that right? I asked, feeling absolutely certain I couldn't have heard right, as what Mrs. Donahue was telling me seemed far too good to be true. And in my experience, when something is too good to be true, it probably is. And somewhere along the line, there's going to be a nasty catch. And I was waiting to hear what that catch actually was. Jasper is the most exquisite town, of which I have visited on many occasions. People flock to this gorgeous town from all over the world, and I could potentially buy a place near enough to this idyllic town. Well, did it get better than that? I honestly didn't think so. Yes, Mr. Farnborough, I assure you that you have not misheard me. If I were you, I'd act as quickly as I possibly could, and arrange to see this place tomorrow morning, before somebody else snaps it up. I understand you and your wife Frida live in Toronto, so you'll need to get the 4-hour flight to Alberta, and probably hire a car once you get here, to drive to the property. I encourage you to do this before the word gets out that this property is up for grabs, because I took the liberty of giving you advance notice about this place, which is not something I should rarely do. Let's just say when word gets out about this idyllic piece of paradise being up for grabs, there'll be dozens of hungry vultures descending upon this meaty carcass, doing their utmost to squirrel it away before you can even blow your nose into a handkerchief. That is, I'm afraid, how fast property as desirable as this goes around here. Sometimes you can barely blink an eyelash and the place is sold. Will tomorrow morning be suitable for you? I asked Mrs. Donahue. I'll get the 4-hour flight out there as quickly as I can. I want to avoid those vultures you speak of if I can possibly help it, I teased. Believe me, Mrs. Donahue, I certainly don't want to sit on my laurels on this one. Everybody knows that property close to Jasper is like a gift from the gods. I'm painfully aware about that. Why, may I be so bold as to ask you, Mrs. Donahue, are you notifying me in advance about this property, before other interested parties know about it? Why are you showing me such special favour? I appreciate it, of course I do, but I was wondering why you're sticking your neck out for me. I'm not used to these kind of privileges. Mrs. Donahue let out a deep breath. It's hard to explain, Mr. Farnborough, but let's just say I have my personal reasons for showing you and your wife such special favour. It's a long story, but to put it in a nutshell for you, Both my parents passed away a year to this very day. In fact, today is the anniversary of their deaths." "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Donahue," I said, wondering how losing her parents had any connection to giving me advance notice about a property that had come on the market. "Well, it was absolutely devastating losing my parents, Mr. Farnborough. Since their passing, a day doesn't go by when I don't miss them like mad. They had the same dreams and aspirations that you and your wife currently have, to build your own dream home on a prime piece of real estate that boasts mountainous views and a lake, and is situated near a charming small town. I guess when I read your requests for what you were looking for, it melted my heart, tugged at my heartstrings, you could say, because your requests were identical to the requests my parents had. They had exactly the same dreams as you and your wife, Mr. Farnborough, and even the letter you sent to our estate agent was actually written in identical handwriting to my father's. So it was hard not to feel compelled to help you out, Mr. Farnborough, and show you special favour." "Well, I don't know what to say, Mrs. Donahue. I'm very sorry about your parents." "Thank you, Mr. Farnborough. I really appreciate that. I had assured my parents when they were alive, given I worked in real estate, of course, that I would find them the quintessential perfect property to build their dream home. I can't help them now, can I, Mr. Farnborough? They are beyond my help. I thought, why not go out of a limb to help a couple who had similar aspirations to my parents? So that's why I decided to contact you in advance, if that makes any sense to you." "You're saying my writing is almost identical to your father's?" "Yes! Isn't that extraordinary? But it is." "Well, I don't know what to say, Mrs. Donahue. For you to show such special favour to me and my wife Frida, it is very touching indeed. I'm extremely moved. Thank you for notifying me about this property." "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Farnborough. It's a pleasure to be able to help you and your wife in any way I can, and I sincerely hope this property will be exactly what you're looking for. I do not believe for a second you'll be remotely disappointed." "I'm just very sorry, Mrs. Donahue, that your parents had to pass away like that so prematurely. Was it an accident, may I ask? Tell me to mind my own business if I'm being too nosy." "No, I'm happy to tell you what happened, Mr. Farnborough. It's very healing talking about my parents, actually. I never want to forget them, you see, and talking about them keeps their memories alive. It was a drunk driver," said Mrs. Donahue, the anger in her voice clearly pronounced. "It was so stupid. A woman went to pick up her children from school during the day. She was incredibly drunk. She drove through a red light at one hell of a speed, and I'm afraid it was over cadovers for my parents who were on the road at the time. My father was killed instantly on the collision. My mother was rushed into hospital but died on the operating theatre, although they did try to resuscitate her a couple of times, but it was no use. She never came around. The drunk driver went to jail for 20 years. She wrote to me and my 6 siblings, you know, a very long letter apologising for what she'd done. She told us in the letter she'd just found out her husband was cheating on her with her best friend. She was consumed with rage and drank a ton of alcohol as a consequence to calm down her fury. And in an inebriated state, she suddenly remembered she had to pick up her children from school that day. Of course, we all felt sorry for her and accepted her apology. Because let's just say you can't live your life under a shadow of unforgiveness, because it will eat you alive. But honestly, Mr. Farnborough, driving drunk like that, in an emotionally fragile state, is absolutely asking for trouble. And yet it doesn't take away the fact that my parents will never be coming back, thanks to her bad, inconsiderate driving. I know the poor woman, discovering her husband had cheated on her, had hit her hard. But you don't drive when you're drunk, I'm sorry, but you don't. She should have organised alternative help to pick up her kids from school. But you can always harp on, can't you, in hindsight, saying if only this, if only that, and it doesn't do you any good whatsoever, because it doesn't change the fact that my parents are gone." "What a horrifying story, Mrs. Donahue. I don't know what to say." "Oh, don't say anything, Mr. Farnborough. There really is no need. It is what it is. Life happens, doesn't it? But let's just say your dream to build a home for your retirement resonated with me, which is why I contacted you immediately. And if that wasn't weird enough, I found your note on my desk on the anniversary of my parents' death. And I guess it spoke to me. And I somehow knew that I was meant to help you in some way. The owner of the property is a woman called Caitlin Dyer. She wants a very quick sale, so if you put your offer in and give her the asking price, I guarantee the property will be yours. I'll see you in the morning, Mr. Farnborough, and I will email you the address. The following day, after a 4-hour flight, I arrived in Alberta and hired a car, and then I began to search for the property, which wasn't too far away from the town of Jasper, but it hadn't been very difficult to find. I arrived at what I can only describe as a large, rusty old cattle gate, and I drove over the grid, which caused the whole car to rattle somewhat precariously. And then I followed a long, windy dirt road through an undulating alpine valley of beautiful flowers that sprinkled themselves like fragrant confetti all over the landscape. It was terribly pretty. In the distance I could see the smouldering silhouettes of the mountains dramatically asserting their authority in the sky, in a voluptuous signature of resplendence. The sky was so blue that day. A few misty clouds hovered mysteriously over the mountains, but beyond that the weather was as close to perfect as you could possibly get. I gingerly drove my rental car towards the glistening lake, which almost looked like Lake Louise, it was so perfectly blue. And overlooking this pristine lake was a mediocre, rather nondescript cabin that looked somewhat unkempt, which I could easily bulldoze and replace with the home of our dreams. I parked my rental car outside the cabin, next to a white Mercedes, which I noticed was not occupied. I assumed that the car belonged to Sophie Donahue, who was probably waiting in the cabin for me to arrive. I knew I wanted this place the moment I drove over the cattle grid, onto this prepossessing piece of land. Indeed, I was caught up with the wistfully nostalgic feeling of coming home again, even though I'd never been to this place before a day in my life. I hadn't brought my wife Frida with me on this intrepid journey, nor had I told her about this prime piece of real estate that had come up for sale. I didn't want to build up her hopes, only to slash them down again, so I told her I was giving someone advice on a property and would be back home the following evening. In hindsight, I was seriously beginning to regret not bringing Frida here with me. I knew how mesmerized my wife would be by the stunning views of this exquisite piece of heaven, but it was too late for me to indulge any regrets, as right now I needed to take the bull by the horns and snap up this property at once, before some greedy building developer got his hands on the place and turned it into holiday cottages for the tourism industry. As I climbed out of the rental car, I noticed the cabin door swinging wide open, and I saw a young woman in her early 30s walking towards me with a spring in her step and a warm smile on her face. She had big brown eyes, and her chestnut-coloured hair gleamed in the sun, accentuating pretty auburn highlights. She was dressed in a white jacket and trousers, and was wearing a colourful scarf around her neck, which brought out the sparkle in her brown eyes. She seemed genuinely pleased to see me, and rushed forward to shake my hand. Her eyes widened as she looked at me, as if my very presence had given her quite the shock. "Mr. Farnborough, I'm so pleased you came. You must forgive me for staring at you so rudely like this. But you won't believe this. You're the splitting image of my late father. How is that even possible? Look at me. I've broken into goosebumps all over my arms." She immediately tapped into her cell phone and handed it straight to me. "You see that man in the picture over there? The one holding up a beer? That's my father. You have to admit, he's the splitting image of you." I stared at the photograph incredulously, and even I got goosebumps all over my body. The man in the photograph looked so much like me. Mrs. Donahue let out a laugh. "I've heard that everybody has a doppelganger, you know. You could be my dad's identical twin. Not biologically, of course, but the likeness between the two of you is extraordinary. No wonder I felt so compelled to show you around the place. Maybe it was serendipitous for me to be so inspired to call you like I did. Do you believe in serendipity, Mr. Farnborough?" "Do I believe in serendipity?" I said, repeating her question. "You mean, do I think some things are meant to be?" Is that what you're asking me?" Mrs. Donahue nodded her head. "That's exactly what I mean, Mr. Farnborough. Do you think things are preordained? That there is a purpose behind everything? I say that because yesterday when I found the note that you wrote on my desk, in a writing uncannily like my father's, I felt, and this was on the anniversary of their death, I certainly felt that I was being nudged to phone you. And then I meet you today, and you look just like my father. It's very, very strange." "Well, yes, now that you put it like that, I think I do believe in serendipity," I said. "I do think some things are written in the stars, you know." "Good, I'm glad you do, Mr. Farnborough, because I think your being here and looking exactly like my father is absolutely serendipitous." She wiped a tear away from her eyes. "Don't mind me, Mr. Farnborough. I'm sorry to get so emotional, but seeing you looking so like my late father is bringing back so many memories. And it's not desperately professional for me to get all weepy like this, so I do apologize profusely." "There's no need to apologize. I'm very sorry I've made you sad." "Far from it. You haven't made me sad at all, Mr. Farnborough. You've made me smile, because you just look like my father, and that in itself makes me very happy. So tell me, what do you think of this place? Let me show you around. I think you're going to really like what you see. I mean, the lake is spectacular, of course, and it's very well stocked with fish. But the cabin leaves a lot to be desired, as you can see. But I dare say if you bought this property, you would likely build a substantial house in the cabin's place. If you've been in building construction, I can imagine the sky must be the limit as far as you're concerned. So no doubt you've got invaluable experience behind you. Do you think you could see yourself building your dream home on this gorgeous piece of real estate, Mr. Farnborough? I will tell you a secret, Mrs. Donahue, as you've been so straight with me from our first call we enjoyed together. From the moment I drove over those cattle gates, up to the cabin, I knew I wanted this place like I've never wanted anything else before in my life. I had that feeling as if I was coming home, if you know what I mean. It was quite bizarre, really." "How extraordinary, Mr. Farnborough, that you should feel this way. I'm delighted it has such a positive impact on you. But then again, you'd be hard-pressed not to fall in love with this place. I mean, the views alone are spectacular. And the lake. Well, I mean, the lake is just exquisite. Now that I'm being perfectly straight with you, Mrs. Donahue, I'd like you to call the current owner and give them the asking price. I'm scared if I dare procrastinate even for a second, I could lose out on this property. I would be pulling my hair out for weeks on end in frustration if that were to happen. I don't like to see a good opportunity slip through my fingers like butter. The one thing I've learnt about real estate, Mrs. Donahue, is you cannot afford to sit on your laurels. I've been in the building business for a long time, and I know enough about real estate to know that procrastination is your very worst enemy." "Hold your horses, Mr. Farnborough," said Mrs. Donahue, raising a hand to slow me down. "It's not going to come to that. As for a start, no one else knows about this place. Well, not yet anyway. It hasn't come onto the market yet. And it won't until late tomorrow. So I've been rather naughty, as I was saying, in contacting you early. But I couldn't help myself, could I? Because your dream was identical to my parents' dream, and so I was naturally driven to help you. Before I show you around, there are some things you need to know about this property before you decide to put in an offer. It might be troubling to you, or at the very least, slightly disconcerting. But I don't think it will bother you too much. At least I hope it won't." "I'm listening," I said. "I don't think there's anything you could say, Mrs. Donahue, to put me off this place. Not now that I feel fully invested in it." "Good, I'm glad to hear that. I rather thought you would say that. Well, where do I begin? Well, for a start, the cabin is in a really bad state of repair, as I was telling you earlier. But I'm sure you can see that already, Mr. Farnborough. But that is not why you're interested in the property, so you will lightly dispose of the cabin anyway. This 18-acre piece of land was owned by the Dyer family. For the record, they were an extremely wealthy family in these parts. The family originated from Great Britain and emigrated to Canada, although they didn't make their wealth in Canada. I think the wealth was inherited. God knows why they didn't build a more substantial property on this large, delightful 18-acre property, as by all accounts the family was sitting on a gold mine, so they could have literally afforded to build a grand hotel here if they'd wanted to do so. They appear to just enjoy simplicity, were exceedingly unpretentious. They lived in that tiny cabin going back a couple of generations. So yes, it is profoundly odd that some people who have that kind of wealth don't invest in anything or spend any of their money. Instead, they sit on their wealth rather like a hen on her eggs, and never spend a single dime of it. I don't believe that they were either parsimonious, penny-pinching, or miserly for a single second, although, of course, I do stand to be corrected. I just think the Dyers were an unconventional family, who enjoyed living a nonconformist, very simple life. They enjoyed living off the land. They grew their own vegetables, had hens wandering around the place, a few cows, and of course the lake over there, that was always heavily stocked with fish. I think Mr. Dyer was a good hunter, you know, so I imagine he took down some wild game from time to time. I'm told they never had much to do with any of the locals in town, although the family regularly attended church every Sunday without fail. They were extremely religious, you see, took their faith very seriously. If you look at the cabin, there are pictures of Jesus Christ spread all over the walls, their bookshelves just brimming over with Bibles and religious books and prayers. The locals would see the Dyer family come to town for their regular shop and to pick up supplies. But the family was naturally evasive in every way, if you know what I mean. The Dyers were extremely aloof. They weren't snooty or anything like that. They were just very private, introverted people. Some said they were a wee bit weird, but I guess you would be described that way if you didn't interact socially with other people. Unfortunately for the Dyers, their daughter, Caitlin, created so many problems for them that they did have to spend a lot of time at school negotiating with the headmistress about how to handle their daughter. My grandfather told me that old Mr. Dyer was a misanthropic man of very few words, with the bushiest eyebrows you've ever seen, and very piercing blue eyes that could look right through you. And that could be very unsettling, you know. So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.